the state of the disunion. As of May 2nd, and we're a week away from that now, but at the time of this recording, but as of May 2nd, COVID-19 had claimed 66,735 American lives, 242,000 lives worldwide. It infected 1.5 million people in the United States, 3.4 million people worldwide. And while it infected those, it has affected financially 701,000 people in the United States alone as of May 2nd. They're talking globally 195 million jobs lost before this is over. We're in the process of what we're calling restarting the economy, but we hear the medical community concerned with another recurrence in the fall or winter. The state of the disunion, I have bad news. COVID-19 has brought rumors, death, sickness, fear, loneliness, rebellion, greed, and for many economic collapse. It's bad. There's no way to reframe it. There's no way to sugarcoat it or try to make it look better. With that said, I have great news, because for everything that the COVID-19 has brought on that list, the church gets to be a prophetic expression of the solution. When we hear rumors, we speak truth. When we hear talk of death, we can speak of life and pray for life. When we hear of sickness, again, we can pray for health. When people are afraid and fearful, we can speak and live peace. When people struggle with loneliness, we can try to find creative ways to connect with that person. Where we see rebellion, we need to model obedience. Where we see greed, we can model generosity. And when we hear of economic collapse, we can share a message that God is a provider. He is the great provider. 1 Peter 2 verse 5 says, "You yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ." We are, again, living stones, being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood. It is our job to offer spiritual sacrifices that are acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So as we respond to COVID-19, we must ask the question, what does this spiritual sacrifice that we can offer that's acceptable to God, what does it look like? Jesus quoted this passage often in the New Testament, and it comes from Hosea 6, chapter 6. It says, "For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." So, again, sacrifice is a worship word. It says, "For I desire steadfast love, not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." So when we start looking and exploring what is this spiritual sacrifice that's acceptable to God, at some point we need to consider that it may be steadfast love and simply knowing God. Romans 12:1 in the Passion Translation says, "Beloved friends, what should be our proper response to God's marvelous mercies? I encourage you to surrender yourselves to God, to be His sacred, living sacrifices, and live in holiness, experiencing all that delights His heart, for this becomes your genuine expression of worship." So when, again, back to 1 Peter 2:5, when we start trying to explore what is this spiritual sacrifice that's acceptable to God, when we consider that in light of Romans 12:1, or in context of Romans 12:1, it says, what is our proper response to God's mercies? It's a surrendered life. It's committed to being a sacred living sacrifice and living in holiness for experiencing all that delights his heart, for this becomes our genuine expression of worship. So our response as a kingdom people, our response as those of us who are in the wilderness, when we see these things that COVID-19 is bringing, our response is being the prophetic expression of everything that's not, and discovering how in this season do we provide acceptable worship. The question becomes, and live in holiness, experiencing all that delights his heart. What delights God? Jeremiah 9:24 says, "But let him who boast of this, that he understands me, that I am the Lord who exercises loving kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For I delight in these things, declare the Lord." What delights God? That we understand him, and that we recognize that he exercises loving kindness, justice, and righteousness. And with him doing that, we do the same. We exercise loving kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. Why? Because God delights in these things. Now, how do we exercise loving kindness? How do we exercise justice and righteousness? When we hear rumors, death, sickness, fear, loneliness, rebellion, greed, collapse, economic collapse, when we hear these things, when we see these things, we become the prophetic expression of the opposite. As a kingdom people, those of us who reside in the wilderness and are being trained in the wilderness, we speak truth, we speak life, we pray for health, we model peace, we connect with people, we obey, we model generosity, and we share the hope of provision. Have you ever wondered, what if, as a result of this? What happens if the church starts calling people, just checking on them, walking down the streets of their neighborhood, waving at people in their yards, making sure they have what they need? I've seen several businesses and restaurants, and I admire them for their efforts feeding frontline providers, emergency room workers, police departments, firemen, as we've had COVID-19. One of the things, and again, I'm guilty as well, but what if the churches started feeding frontline service providers? You know, we had a estimation of 701,000 jobs being lost in the United States alone already. What if we started putting job ads on our church websites? What if we started posting the classified ads and where we're seeing jobs that are needed and are available, while they may not be the same type jobs that someone lost as a job? What if we started posting those ads on our website? What if we started just giving away stuff? In this thing, we've seen a tendency of people to hoard. What if churches just started giving away stuff? Whether it be cleaning supplies, whether it be food, whether it be whatever is needed out there at the time. What if we just started giving away stuff? What if? The questions we must ask is, how do we become that prophetic expression, and what do we do? How do we approach the what ifs? How can we create those what if opportunities? Because I think if we start trying some of those what if opportunities, we're going to start seeing God do some things that we've never seen God do before. Because I think a lot of us are learning church is not something we attend. Church is not something that we necessarily participate in on Sunday mornings. It is that, but it's so much more. Church is us. And it should be us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are the church, wherever we're at. We're the church, we are the kingdom, and many of us are wilderness campers. So thank you for listening this week to this session. I hope it's something that scratches an itch in your spirit, and that at the same time, I hope it's something that causes you to hunger and want more. I hope you have that connection that, hey, this is what this is what I've been thinking. I just wasn't sure how to say it. At the same time, I hope you say, he just scratched the surface. Let me dig deeper. Let me explore this more so. Thank you again for listening. God bless.